Welcome to Sum of Your Parts podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, premier pelvic health expert and women's wellness warrior. Join me as we discuss women's health topics with top elite experts, and you'll discover that you're greater than the sum of your parts. For February, with Valentine's Day right around the corner, we're going to have some fun with some love and sexy conversations. But what better way to kick off this month than to discuss self-love and inner bonding, because you can't truly have a fulfilling relationship until you love yourself first. So on today's episode, we have Dr. Margaret Paul. She's a self-love and inner bonding expert. She's a best-selling author, popular mind-body green writer, and co-creator of the powerful inner bonding self-healing process and the related Self-Quest self-healing online program, which has been recommended by people such as actress Lindsay Wagner and musician Alanis Morissette. She's appeared on numerous radio and TV shows, including Oprah. She has tons and tons of books out with titles such as Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by You? And subsequent titles, Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by God? Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by My Kids? She also has Healing Your Aloneness and Inner Bonding, and her recent published books, Diet for the Divine Connection and the Inner Bonding Workbook. Margaret holds a PhD in psychology. She's a relationship expert, public speaker, consultant, and artist. She has successfully worked with thousands and taught classes and seminars for over 50 years. You can find her information on www.innerbonding.com. You can also find links to her information on my website at drbetsygreenleaf.com. Margaret lives in Colorado. She has 3 children and 3 grandchildren and loves to spend her spare time with the grandchildren, paint, ride her horse, read, make pottery, and kayak. I'm so excited to be talking today with Dr. Margaret Paul. Thank you, Dr. Margaret, for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
So you've written a number of books. I can't even keep track of the number of books, but you specialize in inner bonding. And tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I've been really devoted to trying to find a process that really, really works for people, because I was in so many different forms of therapy for so long and nothing really worked for my own anxiety, my own depression, my own relationship problems and addictions. And so 35 years ago, I was really asking for a process. I had been doing traditional psychotherapy for 17 years, and I was just not at all happy with it. And that's when Spirit downloaded Inner Bonding. I met my best friend, and she's the co-creator, Dr. Erica Chopich, and she had half the process, I had half the process, and Spirit kind of came in and put it all together for us. So it's been evolving for 35 years now, and it has become an amazingly powerful process. I'm always so excited to see the results of what happens when people start to practice inner bonding. Just today, I got an email from somebody who just took one of my inner bonding courses, who said for 20 years, she's been reading books and going to workshops and studying, and nothing touched her debilitating depression. And within the 30 days of my course, it's like everything has changed for her, and she finally has hope.
That's amazing. So
it's so exciting to be able to help people like that. So inner bonding is a self-healing process. It's a 6-step process that anybody can learn who really wants to learn to take responsibility for their own feelings, who wants to learn to connect with their higher source of love and truth and peace, who wants to heal their false beliefs, the wounded parts of themselves, who wants to stop abandoning themselves. That's such a huge issue. Yeah, I mean, people are abandoning themselves all over the place, and they don't even realize that that's happening.
And I think, like, for the purpose of this show, it's a women's wellness show. And I think a lot of times women, and at least I know I do this myself, is we put everybody else before, first, before taking care of ourselves. And sometimes it gets to the point where you don't even know how to take care of yourself.
Well, that's the position I was in 35 years ago. I mean, I was a sickly kid, and so in my early 20s, I started to read about health and nutrition, and I threw everything out, and I started to shop at the one little health food store. So that was 58 years ago. I just turned 80,
Oh
and
my goodness, you look wonderful.
yeah, and so at that time, I was not healthy, and I got a lot healthier. But 35 years ago, before inner bonding, I was getting really sick again. And I had no idea what the issue was. But I wasn't happy, and I had everything one needs. I had a husband I love, kids I love, work I love. Why was I not happy? And then it was exactly what you're talking about. I had been trained to be a caretaker. I had been trained to give myself up, not even know what I felt about anything, and take responsibility for everybody else's happiness. Well, I've since learned that can kill you. You know,
sure.
Yeah, as long as I was giving myself up, I was causing more and more stress, more and more unhappiness. And it took me a while. It's not easy, to recognize what you're doing. It's not easy to understand the various ways that we abandon ourselves. And so it took me a while, but that's when my health skyrocketed, is when I stopped caretaking everybody else. Of course, that's challenging because that was a huge turning point in my life, because I had been caretaking my parents, my kids, my husband. And when you've been doing that, people get mad when you stop doing it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So you have to have the courage, because you might be losing people who you thought loved you. And then you find out they only loved you for what you were doing for them, and that they were not really willing to support my happiness, because it meant that I was going to take care of me instead of them. So it was a very challenging time in my life. It was like Sophie's Choice. Do I keep on doing what I was doing and know that I was going to die because I was so sick? Or do I start to take care of myself and risk losing everybody else? And so at that time, I did make the decision that I was willing to lose everybody else rather than continue to lose myself. And that's when my health turned around. That's when my energy came back. That's when my creativity, my aliveness, everything took off and skyrocketed.
That's amazing. I think I'm in the place right now where you probably were when you first started, because I've been a physician for years and I didn't take care of myself. I put everybody else before me. And I think what happens is, if you don't take care of yourself, your body's going to stop you, for you. It's going to be like, hey, right, enough's enough. And that's actually what happened to me. I had some herniated discs from a car accident, and it didn't bother me, but I wasn't taking care of myself, and I couldn't make the decision to stop and take care of my own self. And my body was like, nope, that's it. You're not doing your job anymore. Right. And I've been out of work now for a year because I had neck surgery, but there's a lot of guilt behind, I still have patients that are contacting me, and I realized how much I was putting into my job and not, putting a little bit too much into my job and my patients and my family, and not taking that time for myself. And there's guilt now about, I'm not there for my patients. But I know logically I need to be there for myself. But that, I think those early steps, it's difficult.
It's very challenging. So the guilt is that inner self, we can call that your inner child, your soul, your essence, letting you know that you are putting a wounded part of you in charge that is judging you, that telling you, oh, it's selfish, that you shouldn't be taking care of yourself. You should be taking care of everybody else. And so most guilt is very non-productive, and judging oneself is a major form. It's one of the 4 major forms of self-abandonment. I did the same thing, judging myself nonstop. And, how many of us as women have been taught that it's selfish to take care of ourselves, that we're supposed to be selfless. Yeah. But the fact is that if I had continued doing that, I would have died. I know it. I was headed for serious illness.
Yeah.
And so it as you can see from your own experience, it is not easy to make that shift. And in fact, for me, All the things I was afraid of happened. My parents got so mad at me, they disowned me.
Oh my goodness.
I lost my 30-year marriage.
Wow.
And 2 of my 3 kids were furious at me. And so it was devastating, but I got me back. I got my health back. And I got my life back, even though it was so hard. So I know that I made the right choice. But boy, that's why I said it's like Sophie's Choice. It is a very, very challenging thing to do. And I understand when people say, no, I'm too scared to stop giving myself up, to stop caretaking. And I had to work hard to stop judging myself. And so, as I said, that's one of the 4 major ways. Let me go through the major ways that people abandon themselves.
Yes,
so self-judgment, we've all learned to do that. And most of us have learned to stay up in our head. You know, when we were growing up, most of us had a lot of pain. I did a lot of pain growing up. And there's no way to handle it as a child with a little body and big pain of loneliness and helplessness and heartbreak and grief. And so we learn to disconnect from our body. We learn to dissociate from our feelings and go up in our head. Well, like if a child came to you and was upset, and you're just on your computer or reading your book or in some way up, in your mind, rather than attending to the child, they're going to feel rejected and abandoned. And that's exactly what happens on the inner level. If you judge them, they're going to feel rejected and abandoned. And so we're doing that to ourselves without realizing it. And then another way we do it is we turn to various addictions. We turn to food, alcohol, drugs, television, sex, pornography, work. I mean, it goes on, the kinds of things that we do to avoid responsibility for our feelings. That's the issue, is that we didn't learn how to lovingly learn from and manage our feelings. That's what inner bonding teaches people to do. And then the 4th way is that we end up making other people responsible for our feelings, which is why we caretake. Oh, if I take care of you, then you'll take care of me. If I'm loving to you, then you'll be loving to me. And so, in fact, it was a shock to me to realize that my caretaking, which I thought was so loving, I thought I was being so loving, was a form of control, because I was trying to get love from others rather than giving it to myself. And so I've seen these 4 ways over and over with everybody I work with, and they don't realize that they're rejecting and abandoning themselves. And then, of course, when we do that to ourselves, we're projecting that out onto other people and thinking they're rejecting us.
Wow.
And so it ends up being very, very stressful, which is what was happening for me, so much stress that was causing my illness.
So what is the difference, I guess, between like traditional psychotherapy and this process that you've developed? Like, where was the disconnect from the traditional form?
Well, that's an interesting question. Not one therapist, and I saw many, ever told me that I was responsible for my feelings. They never told me any ways that I was abandoning myself. And they never helped me learn to connect with a higher source of love. They're not spiritually oriented. Traditional psychotherapists are not spiritually oriented. And so what I've discovered is that there's no way to take responsibility for my own feelings without bringing in that source of love and truth and comfort. There's no way to heal without that. And so in inner bonding, it's mind, body, spirit, where I deal with people with food when they come to me and they're depressed. They're anxious, they're depressed. So much of it is what's going on in the microbiome. They're abandoning themselves on the physical level by, being addicted to sugar and processed foods and industrial seed oils and on and on and on. And, which, as you know, is affecting the brain and causing anxiety and depression. So I can work with them all day with inner bonding, but if they're abandoning themselves on the physical level, they're not going to get anywhere.
Sure. That makes so much sense because I see that all the time in traditional medicine is that we were, taught that the mind, the body, and forget nobody even mentioned spirit, that
Right.
those were all separated. And I totally agree with you. You can't heal or become a better person unless all of those are kind of joined.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're all one. It makes me crazy with allopathic medicine, which obviously does have its place, but it's like, oh, well, I got to send you to this specialist or that specialist because you're this part and you're that part, instead of dealing with the whole person. I mean, I wouldn't see, if I had to see a doctor, I wouldn't see anybody other than functional medicine because,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you with that. Sorry. So when did you develop your program for the inner bonding?
Yeah, Erica and I met 35 years ago and realized she had half the process, I had half the process, and we wrote our first book in 1990 called Healing Your Aloneness, and we were on the Oprah show for that book. And that book has been a bestseller around the world, but we've been evolving it since then. I mean, anything that's really worth anything grows and evolves. And I've been evolving with it because I had to practice it. I mean, it came through, but I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to be present in my body. I was in my head. I was tuned into everybody else's feelings. I had no idea what I felt about anything. I was very sensitive. I was a sensitive kid. I was sensitive to others, as most caretakers are. But I didn't know what I felt about anything. And so it took practice to move from my head into my body. That's a very long journey from the head to the body. And so once I learned to be in my body, then everything became so much easier, because now it's like if a kid is tugging on you, but you're spaced out somewhere and you can't hear it. I feel the tug now immediately. I know as soon as something needs attending to, and I go in and do inner bonding. So if you like, I can go through the inner bonding process.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Sure.
Yeah. So step one is getting present in your body. That journey from the head to the body is getting present inside and actually making the decision that you want responsibility for your feelings. That's a big decision to make, that you're no longer willing to avoid them, and you're no longer willing to try and control others, that you want responsibility. So that's step one. And step two is that we move into our heart and we open to learning. In inner bonding, there's only two intentions that we can choose at any given moment. One is the intention to learn about what's loving to ourselves, how we're abandoning ourselves, what our false beliefs are, what the truth is. And the other intention is to protect against pain with some form of controlling behavior. And so all these forms of self-abandonment are forms of controlling behavior to avoid feeling our pain. So at any moment, we're either trying to control or avoid, or we're open to learning. So in step two, we consciously open to learn, and we teach people how to open and bring in the love and compassion of their higher self, whatever that is for them. And so that creates, in step two, what we call loving adult. And a loving adult is who we are when we're open to learning and connected with the source of love. Then in step three, we're acting like a good parent would. Like if a child came to you upset, you want to know, what's the matter, honey? Or is there something that I did that's upsetting you? So in step three, we do that on the inner level, and we say, what am I telling you? How am I treating you? What am I doing or not doing? We're taking full responsibility. Or what's happening with somebody else, because there are feelings that are being caused by events and other people that I need to be taking responsibility for managing in a loving way. So we're going inside to see how we're treating ourselves, how we may be abandoning ourselves, what false beliefs we're operating from. And with practice, we start to hear that inner voice. And that's what really got me to start to take responsibility and be willing to stop caretaking, because that inner voice came up so loud saying, well, what about me? When is it my turn? When are you going to care about me? And finally said, well, how sick do I have to make you before you pay attention to me?
Sure.
It's that inner voice. So in step 3, we're dialoguing with ourselves. And once we understand what we're doing, we're going a little deeper to that ego wounded part of us that holds all of our false beliefs up here in the lower part of the brain, in the amygdala. That fight or flight mechanism is where all these false beliefs are. And so we're asking that part of us, why are you judging yourself? Why are you staying up in your head? Why are you turning to the various addictions? What are you trying to avoid? What are you so afraid of? What are the beliefs? And so in this way, we're tapping into these subconscious false beliefs. And it's an amazing process because it brings it right up so that we get to see it. Once we understand how we're treating ourselves and why we're doing it, what the beliefs are, in step 4, we open to learning with our higher guidance. And we're asking 2 questions. What is the truth about any of the false beliefs that I've uncovered? And what is loving to me? What is in my highest good? And with practice and being open and keeping the body in a high frequency due to eating clean organic food, we can raise our frequency high enough to access this amazing information, because that information is always here for us. And when we genuinely ask about what's loving to ourselves and what we're doing that's not loving, and we keep our body clean, we start to access that information. And that's really amazing to people because it's not as hard as they think. So in step 4, those are the questions we're asking. What's the truth? What's loving to me? Step 5, we take the action. We can go through all the first 4 steps, but if you're not taking loving action for yourself, it doesn't matter. Like if a child came to you and said, I'm hungry, and you said, oh, thank you for sharing, but you don't give it food, then it doesn't mean anything. So step 5, we take the loving action that we've been guided to take. In step 6, we go back into our feelings and we evaluate. How do I feel as a result of taking this action? If I'm not feeling relief, then I have to go back and ask for another action, because when we truly take loving care of ourselves, we feel a sense of relief. We feel a lightening up inside, and maybe even a feeling of joy. For me, once I started taking care of myself, it was probably the first time I ever felt joy in my whole life. That was amazing. So that's very briefly the 6 steps of inner bonding.
Now, how, like you brought up before, how if you're not used to putting yourself first, right, and taking care of other people, that there may be people in your life who are not going to be happy when all of a sudden you're like, okay, no, I got to take care of myself first. How do you, I guess, recommend people deal with those people in their lives that are not really happy with these new changes and new direction?
What I had to do is I had to get support. My best friend, who was the co-creator of Inner Bonding, Erica, she was a big support. I had some other friends who supported me because, as I said, it was the hardest time of my life. I made a couple of life-changing decisions that really saw me through. And one was that I was willing to end up alone, because I had never been willing. I was always trying to have control over getting the love and the attention. I had to be willing to end up alone and know that I would be okay. And the other was that I was willing to be hurt, because the whole thing about the intention to control, giving ourselves up, is to have control over not being hurt. And so I had to make these 2 decisions, that I was willing to be hurt and that I was willing to end up alone. And so that was vital for me. And so when people were angry with me and upset with me, I mean, we're helpless over how other people treat us. I had to accept that I had no control. That if I continued to give myself up, I knew I was going to die. And so I had to accept the helplessness, the lack of control over others. And what I learned to do, and what people need to learn to do, is be very, very compassionate with themselves. I learned to put my hands in my heart, which stimulates oxytocin. I learned to open and bring compassion in from spirit. I learned to surround myself with the energy of compassion and send it out to others, and to pray for them that they would support me. And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. But I had to be willing to lose them rather than lose me.
That sounds scary, but at the same time, when I think about it, it sounds very freeing.
Yes.
Because I think once you accept that, like, there's nowhere else to go. I mean, like, you accept that, and that's probably the scariest step along the way. So
that's right. And so it was scary, but I did feel that intense sense of freedom. That's why I said, wow, in the midst of all of this change and loss, here I was feeling a sense of freedom and joy that I had never had in my life. It's such a huge release of a burden when you know that you can manage the pain that comes up, that you don't have to protect against it. And this is really what inner bonding is about. It's about learning to show up in very loving ways for the pain rather than avoid it. Because, like with physical pain, if you avoid it, it just gets worse. And the same thing with emotional pain. It's like festering inside, and eventually it just explodes into illness. And so we can't afford to avoid responsibility for our feelings. Well, you have to learn to deal with them. And this is what inner bonding teaches people how to do.
And this sounds like I can think of obviously myself, who needs to be doing this a little bit more, but I'm just thinking of like all the people I know, and I can just think of so many examples of people that are not inner bonding. I mean, you probably are addressing the whole population of the United States and the world, So where do you think along the way do we lose that inner bond? Or do we never have it? Like, do we have it when we're children, and then as we grow, we learn not to do
we don't. We have a spiritual connection when we're young, but most of us had no role modeling. My parents never took responsibility for their feelings. They blamed each other. They shut down. They fought. They turned to various addictions. I never saw anybody taking responsibility for their feelings. And so we don't have role models in our society. It's very rare to read a book or see a movie with role modeling of being a loving adult. And that's why we need to be going to our higher guidance for that role modeling. And you're right, everybody needs this. And on an even deeper level, when you start to take care of your own feelings and you start to connect with your higher guidance and bring love inside, you get all filled up with love, and you want to share that love with others, and you get a sense of oneness. Because when we connect with ourselves, when we create this loving inner family, then we start to see the essence, the beauty in everybody. And really, this is what needs to happen on our planet, because we need to get beyond us and them. Yeah. We need to recognize that we are all one, but it's not going to happen intellectually. It has to happen on the inner level, where we become one within ourselves, and then that gets extended out. And we recognize the beauty in the soul in each of us. And when we reach that point, we can't hurt each other. And that's what has to happen on our planet in order for our planet to heal. Because obviously there's so much greed. Look what's happening to our planet. None of this would be happening if people were truly connected with themselves and their guidance and caring about each other. And far from being selfish, It's the opposite of selfish, because when you're really loving yourself and taking full responsibility, like I said, you get filled up with love and you want to share that rather than always trying to get love. That's the selfish part. You're not trying to get love anymore. You're filled up with love. You want to share love. You want to be there for others. And so it's the exact opposite of selfishness.
I agree. I think especially in the United States, everyone's a victim now. There's so much victim mentality.
Oh.
And that's not doing anyone any good.
No, not at all. I mean, it's so easy to blame others, isn't it? So easy to blame our past or blame our parents or blame our government or blame our partner or somebody, rather than take responsibility. And unfortunately, that's the role modeling that's out there right now, is blaming somebody. That's kind of scary, pretty scary. But all that changes when people learn to take responsibility for themselves. So this is vitally important, not only for our own health and well-being, but for the health and well-being of our planet. Just how vitally important it is. I mean, at this time, it's so important for people to learn to love themselves so they can love each other. You know, most people, when they think about getting into a relationship, their intention is to get love. And that's what creates a codependent relationship. It just doesn't work. And people try and get love with giving themselves up or getting angry or being needy or all kinds of ways that they try and get love. But that is not loving, to abandon yourself and try and get somebody else to give you what you're not giving to yourself. So it's so important for relationships to work, to learn to love oneself and be able to share love rather than trying to get love. And it's so important for our kids. You know, they need this role modeling so that they know how to take responsibility for their feelings.
Yeah, I have 2 young girls who are 9 and 11, and I think it's tough because I'm trying to teach them how to acknowledge their feelings, but there's this big message, especially for girls, that, you know, you don't get angry, don't get mad, be nice, you know. And I'm like, no, you're allowed to get angry. That's your feeling. Nobody can tell you that. But there's all like, you know, they're always like, oh, I got to be nice. I don't want to get in trouble at school. I'm like, you know, if someone's not treating you right, stand up for yourself. You know, that's, you're modeling that up.
But you're the primary role model for them. And so, you know, they're going to learn from you, regardless of what you say to them. They're going to learn from what you do. And that's why it's so important for you to stop caretaking and really be taking responsibility for yourself. Yeah. And not guilting yourself for it, because then they're going to pick that up. Like, you know, my mom's telling me to stand up, and I can feel, I can absorb that she's feeling guilty if she does that. So it must not be okay to do that.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. Because that's how I am. I don't stand up for myself. I think that's why I tell them to do the things that I haven't been able to do myself.
No, but they need the role modeling. You know, kids are very sensitive. They can feel their parents' feelings. And so regardless of what you tell them, they're going to pick up what's going on for you on the inner level. And so it's, you know, I always tell parents it's so important to be learning to be a role model of personal responsibility, of loving yourself. That half of good parenting is being there for your kids, and the other half is being a role model of being there for yourself.
That's a great point. You know, I was also thinking about a lot of my friends who over the years have become divorced. And when they're married, you know, everyone's happy. And then as soon as everyone's divorced, it's always like, well, this person did this to me, or this person wasn't there for me, or this person was mean. And I'm like, well, when you were married, those things didn't come up. And now you're divorced and everyone's like blaming the other person, where and I kind of wonder if those couples just spent the time, maybe even before they got married, on inner bonding, then we wouldn't have the high divorce rates that we have in the United States right now.
That's exactly right. Or any time, even if they don't do it before. I mean, I've been working with couples for over 52 years now. And those people that really do the work, most of the time their marriage works out. Even if one person does it, there's a good possibility that the system will change, because relationships are a system. There's often a taker and a caretaker, or they're both takers or they're both caretakers. In either case, it doesn't work well. Whereas when even one person starts to take responsibility for themselves, at least they have a chance. It didn't work in my marriage, but with most of the people that I work with, it does work. And I didn't know what I was doing. I probably didn't do a very good job at the beginning of taking care of myself in a loving way. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you get married with an agreement that you're going to take care of this other person, and that's it. And then when you change your mind, it just isn't going to work. But that's the chance I took.
And I was thinking in particular about my profession as a physician. We hear so much about physician burnout.
Yes.
And I've kind of been enlightened today, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, the physician burnout is because we're not taking time for ourselves. We're putting everybody else first.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right. And that's why I can still do what I do, because I've been doing this for so long. But I don't take on other people's feelings. I've learned I work with some very, very abused people. So many people come to me having been rejected by other therapists because they can't handle the level of abuse. But I've been doing this for so long. I know how to deal with that. I know how to help them heal. But I also know how to not take it on, and to let it come into my heart, where I bring in compassion and I release it up to spirit, so that I don't get exhausted from being there for others. That really it's when I'm working with people, it's almost like I step aside and I bring in my higher self, and that higher energy is the one doing the work. And so I don't get burnt out and wiped out by it.
You make it sound so easy.
It took a lot of practice. There was a time when I stopped teaching. I stopped doing workshops and stuff because I was getting exhausted. I was taking on everybody's feelings. I was feeling horrible if somebody was upset with me, taking rejection personally, all of that. Then when I started to practice inner bonding, all of that changed. So I don't take it on anymore. I don't take on other people's feelings. I don't take on if they're angry with me. I just don't take it on anymore. And I don't give anybody authority over me. See, that's one of the big things that happens with inner bonding, is that your higher guidance becomes your authority. And you realize that nobody else knows what's best for you. Certainly we can consult other people. We can get help from other people. But to give other people authority over defining whether or not you're okay, that's a disaster. And so through the practice of inner bonding, people learn to define their own sense of worth. And that's huge. When you learn to go to your higher authority, when you give your higher self the only authority over you, and you learn to define your own goodness, your own essence, that beautiful soul that's within you, you stop taking other people's behavior personally. And so you stop feeling rejected and abandoned by other people. It's amazing.
Now, this is definitely hitting home for me. So I think because, especially when I was practicing as a physician too, I took on everybody's feelings. Like my self-worth was based on, could I help somebody? Right. And could I help them? Could I fix their problems? If I could, then I felt better. If I couldn't, then I felt worse. So I'm like, well, this is really making so much sense.
Right. So when you attach your worth and your happiness to, how other people do as a helper, you're going to get burned out. But I don't attach my worth and happiness. They're going to do what they're going to do. It's going to be up to them. I know what I offer is very powerful. If they do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't. And the same thing with your work. You can't make somebody do what you advise them to do. If they did it, they'd probably get well. But how can you take responsibility for whether somebody else is caring enough about themselves to take care of themselves? We don't have that power. So I don't attach any of my worth to what my clients do. I'm not invested in it at all. They're miserable. Okay, I'll help them see what they're doing that's causing it, but I'm not responsible for it.
I started realizing that over time too, that I could give them all my knowledge and all the tools in my toolbox, but if somebody doesn't want to get better, they're not. That they have to make that inner choice of whether to be better or not.
Right, and we have to accept our powerlessness over other people's choices. And let it go, because as soon as we get in there to try and control them, we create a problem for ourselves and them.
You've had so many different books. Do you have one that's your favorite?
My last two books, one came out last year and one came out this year. The one that came out last year is called Diet for Divine Connection, Beyond Junk Foods and Junk Thoughts to At-Will Spiritual Connection. So the first part of the book is how to get your body in a high enough frequency to connect with your higher self. And the second part goes into detail about inner bonding. And then the one that came out this year is the Inner Bonding Workbook. And this is a very in-depth workbook. If people really want to learn inner bonding, they don't have the money to work with me or come to a workshop or come to an intensive or take a course, this book will teach them in a very in-depth way the inner bonding process. If they work it, they have to work it. It's not something you read, it's something you do. So I love these two books because I know how helpful they are.
And you talk a lot about frequency. Can you explain what you mean by frequency?
So frequency is the rate at which we vibrate. Everything in the universe is frequency. And for example, if you walk into a room of angry, blaming victim people, you're going to feel down. That's a low frequency. If you walk into a room of loving, caring, happy, joyful people, that's a high frequency. And so spirit exists at a much higher frequency than we operate at, which is why most of us can't see our spiritual guidance. I mean, there are some people who can raise their frequency high enough to see that. Erica is one of those people. She's always been able to do that. And there are some people that can do that. I can raise my frequency high enough to hear them. Occasionally I will see, but most of the time I hear. And really people can learn to do that. And it takes these two things. It takes really being very devoted to what you put into your body. I used to be very addicted to sugar and junk, and it took me a long time to get over that addiction. But when I realized how connected being able to access my spiritual guidance is to the frequency of my body, that did it. I almost never am tempted to put anything in my body that's not healthy and clean. And so that's one aspect of raising your frequency. And the other is the intention to learn about loving yourself. That is very, very magical. And I tried for years to connect to my guidance. And I was eating well for many, many years. But it wasn't until I opened to learning about loving myself that suddenly that connection became very easy for me. And I thought, wow, this is great. All I have to do is teach my clients about how to be open to learning about loving themselves, and they'll be able to connect. But it didn't happen. And that's when I finally connected the dots and realized that it's both on the physical level and the emotional, spiritual level that our energy, our frequency has to be high. And when people do that, they're amazed at how easily they can connect to that higher source.
Yes, once again, you can't separate the mind, body, and spirit.
No,
it's all going to be. If people wanted to, okay, so you have that book. Where else can people find information about doing your courses or what happens in your courses?
Yeah, well, so they can get information going to innerbonding.com, We have a lot. We offer a lot. I have a product called SelfQuest, which for people who like to work online, it's very, very in-depth. It's a membership. They can join for 3 months, 6 months, or lifetime, and it will teach them so much about themselves as well as the inner bonding process. I have 30-day courses. I have Love Yourself, which is an online at-home course, and it includes a special forum where I'm on there and I answer questions, and a once-a-week coaching call where I'll answer questions and work with a few people. And I have 3 other courses: Frequency, which teaches you how to connect, and Attracting Your Beloved, and Passionate Purpose, Vibrant Health, which teaches you how to access your purpose in life and dealing with health issues. And I have many books, as you said, that are available. I have a membership community where people can join and have access to me. I'll answer questions and help people. And then, of course, I work with people on the phone all over the world and Skype. And I have many trained facilitators who also do that. We have a wonderful facilitator training program for people who want to train to do inner bonding with others. And so, people go to the site. There's thousands of articles about inner bonding. We have a free course that if people come, they can take the free course, which will get them started. We have an introductory video that goes over the whole thing. There's just so many ways to learn inner bonding.
That's amazing. I'm like, how do you have the time in the day to do all those things?
Well, it's been a while. It's evolved over time. So, I've been doing this a long time.
And with all those commitments, how do you keep yourself, I guess, still bonded to yourself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I start off every day with a walk outside. I walk my dog outside. I love to be outside, and I live rural. So I do an inner bonding process out loud for a half an hour every day. And that starts me off. And then I stay connected to my feelings throughout the day. And if I feel anything other than peace inside, I'm right there attending to it. But also, I have a lot of balance in my life. I work very hard for 3.5 days, and I'm off for 3.5 days. So I play, I have horses, I'm an artist, I have an art studio, I do a lot of creative things, I'm with my grandkids. I mean, there's just a whole lot that I do to have balance in my life.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it sounds like I said, definitely I'm looking into this because this is something I've ignored for myself for years. So I'm going to be looking into all your products.
Right.
But I really appreciate the work that you do and for being with us to talk about this.
You're very welcome.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to cover?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think at the moment.
That's always the question.
I want everybody to know that they can learn this. It's not that it's hard to learn. It's not hard to learn. It's just that it takes a lot of practice, like anything worth doing. Like it's not hard to learn the chords of a piano, but it takes a lot of practice before you get good at it. And so it's not hard to learn these steps, but it does take practice to really get good at it. And so most people, when they start to do it, they feel better right away. And they think, oh, wow, I'm already better. But this is ongoing. This is something you build into your life. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
That is great. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome. You take care.